Hello, morning. Welcome to the Sunday Show. I'm Martin Geisler. A profound moment in modern politics, a bloodbath, an apocalypse even. However you want to describe it, the collapse of the two main parties in elections in England this week and the rise of Reform UK has sent British politics into a tailspin. But what impact could the party of Nigel Farage have at the Scottish elections next year? Joining me this morning to discuss all this, Russell Findlay. He's been leader of the Scottish Tories for less than 9 months, but in that time, his party's slumped right across the UK. With Farage and Reform on the march, people are now beginning to even question whether the Tories have a future. I'll ask him what he thinks about it all. And this time last year, Anas Sarwar pitched himself to be the next First Minister of Scotland. Blimey, that feels like a while ago, doesn't it? He's got a year until the Scottish elections. So how does he plan to turn his flagging fortunes around? I'll ask him that question when he joins me in the studio too. After that, it's over to Lucy White on the radio and on BBC Sounds. Hi, Lucy.
Morning, Martin. Well, following on from your conversation with the party leaders, I'll be talking to activists, the ones who'll be knocking on doors and handing out leaflets for the next 12 months. Who has the harder job? And we'll also be talking about those election results in Australia. Does the Labour Party there owe their win to Trump and tariffs? And as always, we'll take you through the Sunday papers.
Excellent. Lucy, with you on the radio and on BBC Sounds from 10:30. Right, let's get on with the show. Yeah, I'm sure you'll have your own thoughts about politics at the moment. It would be perhaps more surprising if you didn't just now. If you want to share them, you can join the conversation right through the programme. The hashtag on social media is BBC Sunday Show. So those extraordinary election results at the end of the week seem to have turned English politics on its head. Nigel Farage's Reform UK taking scalps up and down the country and stealing votes from both of the main parties. Serious, serious business this for Labour and for the Tories. We're going to hear at length from their Scottish leaders in the next half hour. First, though, just a quick bit of an analysis to put all this into perspective here in Scotland. Mark Diffley, pollster with the Diffley Partnership, joins me from Edinburgh. And Lindsay Bewes, our chief political correspondent, is here with me in the studio. Good morning to both of you.
Morning, Martin.
Mark, let me come to you first. I hope you can hear me. Is there a line to be drawn from these results in England directly into our slightly different world of politics here in Scotland? And if so, what does it look like?
Morning, Martin. Yeah, I think there absolutely is a line that I pick sort of two or three things, really. One is that we now have even more evidence that the rise of Reform is real. They can translate polling ratings into actual, in this case, English council election and mayoral election wins and good performances. So that's number one, because I think that's been in some doubt for a little while. Number two, I think for Labour, which applies down in England and in Scotland, is dealing with Reform is not going to be an easy issue. Labour is losing votes to its left and to its right, so not just to Reform, but to the Liberal Democrats down south and the Green Party down south, and here to the SNP. And I think for the Conservatives, they've hit rock bottom in England this week, and the polling here shows pretty much the same. So how the two main parties or the two parties respond to what they've seen this week is going to be as important in Scotland, given that we're now a year away from the Holyrood election.
Right, and just briefly, how are Reform polling in Scotland then, Mark? I mean, we have a different system as well, of course. We don't have first past the post.
We do.
We've got perhaps a more representative system where smaller parties can pick up more seats. So how are they polling just now?
So support for Reform in Scotland is about half of what it is in the UK as a whole. So the projections on the basis of the English council elections this week, Reform polled at about 30%. In Scotland, they poll at about 13, 14, 15%. So about kind of half of what of their support down south. Now, your point about the electoral system and the electoral system for the Holyrood Parliament, the proportional representation system is a very good one, because that 15%, that will give them a cohort of double figures in terms of MSPs, 10, 12, maybe up to 15 MSPs this time next year. And that changes our politics in really kind of fundamental ways. That impacts on legislation that can be passed, particularly as we're likely to have a minority government. They'll have membership of committees, and just the environment in and around Holyrood will change significantly as a result. You know, if that happens, and if their support continues to grow in the lead up to the Holyrood election next year. So there's really big change afoot.
All right, Mark, stay with us. Lindsay, I mean, we're going to hear from Russell Findlay and Anas Sarwar in just a minute. They'll tell us what they choose to tell us on air. But more interestingly, you get all this scuttlebutt from behind the scenes around Holyrood and so on. What have you been hearing since Thursday? How much of an impact have results had up here since then?
Yeah, I think there is concern among all the main parties, but I think, Martin, the truth is there has been that concern there over this pattern that Mark was talking about, that we're seeing in opinion polls there regarding reform and their surge that's suggested in those polls in Scotland. There was that concern there already among the main parties. For the Conservatives, the loss of some of their votes to reform. For Labour, the loss of some of their votes as well. The SNP less likely, I think, to lose their votes to Reform UK. But, you know, we had that summit, anti-far right summit, as it was first billed by the First Minister just recently, that seemed to come about as a result of what we were seeing in polling regarding Reform UK. So there is concern among all of the main parties about what this could mean for the Holyrood election in a year's time. Mark talked a bit there about the English elections that we've just seen, showing that what is suggested in polling has now been translated by that party into real world results for them, real election results. We have the by-election next month in Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, which is an electoral test for Reform UK in Scotland. Can they do the same? Can they translate what we're seeing being suggested by polling into real results? We have 10 candidates contesting that by-election. I think all eyes, though, are going to be on what the SNP and Labour can do, which of those parties can pull ahead in that contest, but also how Reform can perform there. Can they push the Tories out of third place? And while it's only one by-election, it doesn't necessarily tell us what's going to happen in the Holyrood elections next year. I think it's crucial when you're a party that's trying to enforce existing narratives or debunk those narratives, or you're trying to gain some kind of momentum.
We've got a year to go, this coming week, until the Scottish elections, assuming they're not called early. We get the programme for government this Tuesday. The SNP, effectively, Scottish Government, effectively setting out their stall. This will be the ground, the territory on which they campaign. What are we expecting to hear on Tuesday? Yeah, that's right. So they have brought forward the programme for government that would normally come at the end of the summer. They're doing it with a year to go until the elections. They had a press release that went out for today entitled Delivery for Scotland. The First Minister wants to try to show that he can deliver on his four main priorities, which are child poverty, public services, economic growth and tackling climate change. I think there's going to be a big focus there on trying to improve the NHS, trying to show that they can improve people's lives, that they can tackle things like the cost of living as well. The trouble is the SNP have obviously had 18 years in power to do these things, and you can see what the attack lines are going to be from the opposition parties already. Interesting as well, isn't it? Because Labour have been criticised for focusing on delivery. Just against somebody like Reform, delivery doesn't cut through, is what people have been saying in the last couple of days. Mark, briefly just back to you. Yeah. A year to go, programme for government coming up. How heavily do you think the SNP are going to play on reform as well? I mean, you know, they've already started painting Farage as the bogeyman, haven't they? Is that going to be something we're going to have to get used to over the next year? Is this powerful stuff for them?
I think it absolutely is, and I suspect we'll hear more of the same from them. I think Lindsay's right, and actually, you know, a year still does feel in some ways like a long time to go, but you know, the programme for government's coming out. We're heading to the summer recess. The SNP has the narrative at the moment with the programme for government coming out. So you know, soon we'll be kind of 6 months out from the election or from the campaign starting. So you know, if we want to see you know, for Labour and for the Conservatives, you know, time is really of the essence here, because the election will will soon be upon us, and it really is up to them to try and change the narrative and win some of this support back.
All right, Mark, Lindsay, thank you both very much indeed for being with us. Loads for us to get into in the remainder of this programme. It's bad, all this, isn't it, for the Tories? But could it get even worse? Remember, this recalibration of the right we keep hearing about isn't exclusive to England. Reform UK finished above the Scottish Conservatives in every constituency in Glasgow in the general election last July. The Tories have changed their leader here since then, so how does Russell Findlay plan to stop what appears to be a political juggernaut at the moment? Let's ask him. Morning.
Good morning.
Bloodbath, apocalypse, terminal decline. We used those phrases at the top. They weren't phrases we made up. They're phrases that have been used by senior figures in your party to describe what's happening at the moment. How would you describe what happened on Thursday?
Well, these are terrible headlines, terrible result. But let's look at this in context. Not a single vote was cast in Scotland. I'm the leader of the Scottish Conservative Party, and it's my job to bring forward common sense, conservative policies that people actually care about, to try and address the issues that matter in people's lives. That's my focus.
So we've got a unique, different thinking electorate, do we, who can't be seduced?
It's a statement of fact. There wasn't a vote cast in Scotland. We are working hard.
We've got polling that we've just been discussing.
Well, but I'm working hard. I mean, I've been in this job 7 months. Kemi's been in her job 6 months. And we recognise why people feel disillusioned and disconnected, especially here in Scotland. We've had 20 years almost of SNP failure, where every single public service, in my opinion, has got worse. People are paying more and getting less, and that's why it's so important that we get back to the issues that truly matter to people.
Just explain to me why a Scottish Conservative wouldn't be seduced by Reform UK in the way that an English Conservative just has been.
Well, what we've seen from Reform, from Nigel Farage's own mouth, is he would be quite comfortable putting an SNP First Minister into Bute House. And many of their candidates are nationalists. It's absolutely questionable whether they're even a party of the Union. People can see the Scottish Conservatives for the past decade and more standing up to the SNP government. We were the only party at Holyrood, time after time, who stood up to the fringe obsessions of the SNP, whether it's gender self-ID, the Hate Crime Act or anything else. We're the party that understands the needs of mainstream Scotland and care about fixing those, about getting people a GP appointment when they need it, reducing the taxation on hard-working Scots, and fixing the education system, which used to be world-leading, and since the SNP took control almost 2 decades ago has become completely disastrous.
What messaging, what part of that messaging would Reform not echo? I mean, what are you offering that's different to Reform?
I don't know what Reform stand for, other than the fact...
Change, we keep hearing.
Well, if you want change in Scotland, there's only one party able to deliver that. That's the Scottish Conservative Party. We're the only party that stood up consistently against not just the SNP, but the entire left-wing Holyrood consensus.
Every single party that's not in government tells you they promise change.
We're the only party that have put our money where our mouth is. And if you look at Holyrood, if the past decade at Holyrood, whether it's the gender recognition reform bill that Nicola Sturgeon pushed through Parliament, we were the only party that stood up.
Will be anti. Where does your messaging change from Reform?
Our judges and actions, not words. We're the party.
We can't judge Reform. They're a new party.
Well, perhaps also Reform need to be subject to the same level of scrutiny and analysis and questioning that the mainstream parties are.
Well, that takes time.
Indeed, but you're asking what we stand for. We stand up for common sense. We stand up for mainstream Scotland. We understand that people are disconnected, they're disillusioned with the Scottish Parliament because far too much focus is on fringe issues.
Do you understand the appeal of Nigel Farage?
Do I understand the appeal?
Yeah.
No, I don't.
You can't fathom why 30% of the electorate south of the border, 15% of the electorate up here might vote for him?
What I understand is why people, voters in Scotland and across the United Kingdom, feel disillusioned, they feel disconnected and left behind by politics. I'm not a career politician. I'm new at this. I've been doing this job 7 months. I completely understand why people feel that way. But Reform are not the answer. In Scotland, the only way to defeat the SNP and get them out of power in 2026 is a strong vote for the Scottish Conservative Party.
What do you do about this on the right? This fracturing of the right, of British politics, of Scottish politics, could be incredibly damaging to the Conservative Party. Existential, we're told. So what do you do about it? Some kind of alliance with Reform? The way you're talking about them this morning, that seems to be completely off the cards as far as you're concerned.
I'm not interested in doing any form of deal with Reform or any other party that would support the SNP or support splitting up the United Kingdom. What we need to do is fight for every single vote, set out, as we've been doing for the past 6-7 months, why we are different, our common sense conservative values, lowering taxation, fixing the NHS, fixing the schools, talking about the things that really matter to the people of Scotland.
There's a by-election next month in Hamilton. Do you think you will finish above Reform? You didn't manage in any constituency in Glasgow last year.
Well, I could point to by-elections recently across Scotland where we not only
I'm pointing to this
Reform
one in Hamilton.
Well, but there's precedent where we beat Reform and indeed won the seats. In this particular seat, I was delighted to be out there on Friday for the lunch event. Scores of Scottish Conservative activists from across the country were there to support our fantastic candidate, Richard Nelson, who I believe will do it very well. So
you think he will finish above Reform?
Well, my job is not to guess what might happen, but to go out there and fight for every single vote.
Listen, existential is how people are describing this. Do you understand that as a concept for the Conservative Party? Do you think if something isn't done to arrest what's going wrong at the moment, this could be a problem that threatens the very existence of the Conservative Party as we know it?
Last year, just a short time ago, we lost a general election in a very, very bad way, a very, very extremely poor result for us. And Kemi and I both understand that, and that's why we are both working hard to rebuild trust, to understand what people want us to focus on and getting on with delivering.
Is she still the right person for the job?
Absolutely.
Why?
She is like
thumped.
me. Well, she has inherited this issue, this lack of trust, this disconnect, and she is doing what I'm doing, setting out why we need to do things differently. She said this morning, I believe, in one of your other programmes, that this is a long-term plan that she's working to. She has, we've got a UK general election for many years down the line, whereas in Scotland, next year is absolutely critical. The people of Scotland have got a choice. Do they want yet 5 more years of failure under the SNP, or do they want something different? And we are the only party standing up to the SNP consistently and standing up for mainstream Scotland.
Are you putting yourself forward as a serious first ministerial candidate?
I think every single person going into these elections is fighting for every single vote.
Right, so you're offering yourself up as next First Minister?
I didn't say that, no.
Well, kind of did. OK, what about Robert Jenrick? Last question. He is, I suspect, on manoeuvres at the moment, certainly very visible on Friday morning in a way that Kimmy Badenoch wasn't. What do you make of him?
I think all our colleagues are doing the same thing, which is fighting Reform, fighting the SNP in Scotland and fighting Labour. Labour have been in power. One of the reasons for Reform's rise has been the spectacular disaster that is Sir Keir Starmer's UK Labour government, from removing the winter fuel payment and being completely catastrophic around the economy.
Well, we are going to get onto that in a second with our next guest. We're going to have to let you go just now, but Russell Findlay, leader of the Scottish Conservatives, thank you very much indeed for being with us this morning. We're doing a lot of talking about this by-election in Hamilton and Stonehouse. We did put up a slide there. It is again on the television with all the candidates on it. If you're listening to us on the radio or on BBC Sounds, you can find a full list of candidates on the BBC website. And by the way, if you want to have your say on the political matters of the day, here is Stephen Jarden with details of how you can take part in Debate Night.
Thanks, Martin. Debate Night is the only show in Scotland where you get to put your questions to the people in power. On Wednesday, we're going to be in Perth. Week after that, St Andrews. Go to our website for more information about how you can get involved. It's bbc.co.uk/Debate Night. Click on the links and watch Debate Night every Wednesday at 9 on the BBC Scotland channel.
Thank you, Stephen. Well, it's not just the Conservatives who should fear the advance of Reform. Nigel Farage warned last year he was coming for the Labour Party too. And Thursday's results suggest he can deliver on that threat, with Keir Starmer slumping in popularity and a seemingly resurgent SNP to worry about up here. Can Anas Sarwar really still set his sights on Bute House at the Scottish elections in a year's time? Let's ask him. Morning.
Good morning. Simple answer, yes.
Can you?
Yes,
well,
absolutely.
I mean,
because people want a different direction here in Scotland, and the only way of getting that different direction
is through Russell Findlay. He's just told me.
If we remove the SNP who've been in power for 18 years and we set a new direction with Scottish Labour in government and me as First Minister, and that's the challenge I'm excited about looking forward to the next 12 months.
Problem is, you're in a great deal of trouble at the moment, are you not, given what we've seen through the week and given what polling suggests at the moment? What is your assessment of what happened to your party on Thursday?
Anyone that's thought that I've had an easy job in the last 4 years obviously hasn't been watching. It's been a challenge all of the last 4 years, and the next year is going to be a challenge, but we've come through challenges before and won, and we'll do that again in the coming year, but we've got to persuade the public. On the important point you make about Thursday, look, it's pretty obvious it was a disappointing result, but I think there's a broader thing here. So I think it's hard, first of all, to extrapolate what happened in certain local areas in England and presume that will happen everywhere across the UK, including here in Scotland. But there is an underlying theme which I think is consistent right across the UK, and that is people, and a significant proportion of the people, don't believe that governments are working for them. They don't believe the economy works for them. They don't believe public services work for them. They look at a government here in Scotland that's wasting hundreds of millions of pounds every single year whilst their taxes are going up, and they just feel as if the system is broken.
Well, nobody voted in Scotland. If they're falling out of love with governments, they're falling out of love with your party and its failures in Westminster. The challenges that you say you faced in the recent past have largely not been caused by anybody else. They've been caused by your own colleagues in Westminster, making mistakes, missteps, miscommunicating, and making your job really difficult. Would you disagree with that?
Well, a couple of things. One is, I think we shouldn't say that we're going to let off the SNP, who will be in power for almost 20 years, and blame all of Scotland's challenges.
They had nothing to do with Thursday's results.
Let me finish. And blame all our challenges on a government that's been in power for, at that point, it'll be 2 years. It's been less than a year so far for the UK Labour government. But are there things that a UK Labour government has to go further and faster on? Absolutely. Because fundamentally, if we're going to challenge the politics of division, if we're going to challenge the politics of polarisation, governments have to deliver people, and people have to feel as if their lives are improving. Now, some progress has been made in that. For example, the New Deal for working people, for example, the increase in the living wage, but people don't think it's gone fast enough yet. And that's the challenge I would pose to. That's a challenge I would pose to a UK Labour government that's only been in power for less than a year, that's trying to clear up the mess of 14 years from the Tories. But in Scotland, the SNP's had its chance if it had a good idea.
Sorry, what's the challenge you would pose to the UK government?
If it had an idea, the SNP would have delivered it by now.
So
to the UK,
what's the challenge you would pose?
What I would say to the UK is, of course, we have done many good things. I've given you 2 examples already. The waiting lists are coming down, for example, in England. They're not coming down in Scotland because we still have the incompetence of the SNP to deal with. But the point I'd make to colleagues across the UK is you have to go further and faster in improving people's lives.
All right.
Yes, they have to stop any kind of missteps, but they also have to deliver on the promises made in the election further and faster so people can feel that change in their lives.
Or stop breaking promises. Ros Jones, newly re-elected as Mayor of Doncaster, got a bit of coverage this week. She is obviously Labour Party member. She says your party, her party, has got it wrong on the winter fuel allowance, got it wrong with national insurance increases, got it wrong with hitting disabled people's benefits. The electorate seem to agree with her. Do you agree with her?
So I think you've got to take all 3 of those issues separately. My view is well known. I disagree with the decision on the winter fuel payment. I think it was a wrong decision.
That's a real cut-through decision. It's one of those moments in politics that really gets people angry. How much did that have to do with what happened on Thursday?
You're asking if I agree or disagree with the decision. I'm making it very clear that I disagreed with the decision. It's now a devolved benefit, and we will reinstate the winter fuel payment if we have a Scottish Labour government next year. On the welfare changes, we've got to again be really careful. The changes to PIP are changes that are happening in England and Wales. They do not apply in Scotland because we have the devolution of ADP in Scotland.
Speaks to your party and its values.
PIP doesn't apply in Scotland, but do we want any change to be fair? Of course we do, and that's why we'll look at any legislation that comes forward. And you raised a third issue, Martin, sorry, of the 3, on the national insurance.
National insurance
on national
so damaging for a lot of businesses.
That is a really difficult decision the Chancellor had to make, but you can't have it both ways. And that's the point I think is being missed here in terms of the debate in Scotland. You can't on one hand say we want to put an extra £2 to £3 billion into our National Health Service, but then oppose the means of raising the money to put into the National Health Service, which is the inconsistency you've got.
Is there a communications problem for your government then? Is Keir Starmer and the people around him, are they failing to communicate the good work that's being done? Something's happened here.
So what I don't want to say is it's purely a communications issue, because I think
is that part of it?
I think partly you have to tell a more positive story about what the destination is for the country with a UK Labour government. And I think they've got examples of that. I've given you a few examples already of good things they've done. But if you are going to paint a picture of where the country is going to get to, I think we do have to demonstrate that much, much more clearly. But in the here and now, just promising what the future looks like in 5 years' time or 10 years' time is not going to be enough. People need to feel that benefit in the here and now.
How's it going to feel?
And there have been increases, for example,
there have been
increases in pensions, for example. There have been increases to living wage. There is the New Deal for working people. There is some significant investments in different projects, all of which are really good, which we have to amplify, but we have to go further and faster in the change that people want to feel in their communities.
How do you protect your vote from reform? If reform can win in County Durham, under Labour control for a century, the place where they host the Miners' Gala this month, big left-wing Labour heartland. If they can take that, and they just have, nothing's safe, is it?
Well, how we're going to challenge that is John Swinney will want to make it about Nigel Farage. I'm not interested in Nigel Farage. Nigel Farage has no interest in Scotland, and he has no interest in the people of Scotland.
Is he a threat to the
I'm
union?
interested in the National Health Service, which John Swinney is failing. I'm interested in our education system, which John Swinney is failing. I'm interested in spending the Scottish people's money well and ending the waste of the SNP, which John Swinney is failing in. That's the issues that are going to decide the election next year. Nigel Farage can't fix those issues. He can act as a spoiler and a cover for John Swinney. I can get rid of John Swinney and change the direction for Scotland.
Can Nigel Farage be the next Prime Minister?
I don't believe so, but you can't be complacent, and that's why we have to make sure a UK Labour government delivers over the course of the 5 years of this Parliament, so people positively want to re-elect it.
Right. The SNP are weaponising the thought of Nigel Farage as the next Prime Minister quite aggressively at the moment. If you think that is a possibility, is he a threat to the union?
Look, the biggest threat to the United Kingdom is a failure to support people to improve their lives. That's the biggest challenge. That's a challenge I would pose to a UK government as opposed to a Scottish government. But let's be really clear about what John Swinney and the SNP are trying to do with Nigel Farage. They had the helpful of the Tories being in government to play them as the bogeyman, two sides of the same divisive coin, so they didn't have to talk about their own record and they didn't have to deliver for people here in Scotland. And John Swinney's now that the Tories have collapsed, he's going to try and play that same game with Nigel Farage. The election next year is not about Nigel Farage, it's about the NHS. And if you think the NHS matters, the Scottish government matters, and that's why we've got to change direction.
It's about what the electorate decide it's going to be.
It's about people's schools, it's about children's education, it's about skills for our young people.
And it's about your record.
All of that is what John Swinney does not want to talk about.
And it's about broken promises. Let me try this.
We're electing a Scottish government next year.
We would step in. Let me just.
And that's what people are going to choose.
Quotes from you. We would step in to save the jobs at the Grangemouth oil refinery. We'll put hundreds of millions of pounds into an energy transition hub at Grangemouth to protect the place for future and save the jobs there. Grangemouth was the first big test of your energy industry commitment, and you sat back and watched it burn.
Well, the people that sat back and did nothing was the Tories across the UK who knew for almost
400 jobs are going.
No, one second, Martin, this is really, really serious. For almost a decade, the Tories knew what was coming at Grangemouth, the SNP knew what was coming at Grangemouth, and they didn't lift a finger. In months, a Labour Party came in and has put £200 million on the table to try and find those investable propositions, to try and find the investable propositions to get a long-term future. And at no point has the SNP or the Tories claimed that they want to nationalise Grangemouth as much as they might want to.
Well, I'll tell you who claims it. You claimed you were going to save the jobs there, and you haven't. 400 jobs are going. Your own party colleague, Brian Leishman, the MP for Grangemouth, is furious about this.
As even John Swinney noted, that a UK Labour government tried consistently to prolong the life of the refinery, but there was an intransigence from the company. But let's not forget,
you stepped in and saved Scunthorpe to save production and save jobs.
But again, let's compare like for like. If we're talking about the steel industry, what has happened to our two steel sites here in Scotland? What's happened in Lochaber? The SNP sold it off to a dodgy businessman, and look what's happened there. Look what's happening at the DL steel plant. If the SNP is serious about industrial policy in Scotland, it needs to use its levers and its power as well. It's failed on Ferguson's, it's failed on Prestwick, it's failed on Lochaber, it's failed on DL Steel.
Did you break your promises
They have
on
no industrial steel. I promised we'd put in hundreds of millions of pounds.
You promised to save jobs.
Look, we are trying to protect the site and the future of the site. That's part of the transition, and that's why we've invested that £200 million from the National Wealth Fund.
Last question, in a sentence, if you could. Would you like to see the Open held at Donald Trump's Turnberry golf course, and should the UK government be pushing for that?
Well, I think it's for those that organise the Open to decide what the locations are, but do I want prime events here in Scotland? Of course I do.
You'd back it?
I want prime events here in Scotland, but it's for the committee that decides these things to decide that, not government.
You wouldn't get involved?
I want these events to come to Scotland. That's the main thing.
Anna Sarwar, you made that very clear. Thank you very much
my
indeed for
pleasure.
joining us here on the Sunday Show. That is it from me. I'm back, same time, same place next week. Join me if you can. If you're with us on the radio, here's Lucy.